It is now my privilege to introduce the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Robert J. Papp, Jr. Admiral Papp graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 1975. He is a native of Norwich, Connecticut, and a graduate of Norwich Free Academy. Admiral Papp is the 24th Commandant of the United States Coast Guard and is the 13th Gold Ancient Mariner. He has served in 6 cutters and commanded 4, including America's tall ship, the Coast Guard training bark Eagle. As a flag officer, he has served as Commander, Coast Guard Atlantic Area, the Coast Guard's Chief of Staff, Commander of the 9th Coast Guard District, and the Director of Coast Guard Reserve and Training. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Admiral Papp.
Good morning, shipmates. Well, you dress up real well since the last time I saw you at 2200 last night. To all our distinguished visitors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning, and it's my privilege today to introduce our guest of honor and your commencement speaker. Now, to the class of 2014, you know that every time I come up here, I have some lesson or something I want to teach to you, and today will be no different, because I want to teach you about there are some times when you speak from a script, and then there are other times that you speak from the heart. Today is one of those days that I'm going to speak from my heart. And we could roll out a bio for you to read about our guest speaker, but what would that really tell you about the man himself? Fortunately, I've had the privilege to work with Secretary Johnson for about 4 years now. I've had a chance to observe him, to learn from him, and to learn a little bit about the content of his character. So it's a pleasure for me this morning to be here to first of all participate in his assumption as a service secretary, but also to introduce him as your commencement speaker. When I first met Secretary Johnson, he was serving as the General Counsel to the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates. In that position, he was responsible for 10,000 military and civilian lawyers across the Department of Defense. But most importantly, when I came in as the Commandant, we were going through one of the most revolutionary and evolutionary events that I've seen in my career, which was the repeal of the law that we refer to as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Secretary Johnson, during his time as the General Counsel, was the co-author of a 240-page report that led to the repeal of that law. During that time, I had almost weekly meetings with the Secretary of Defense, with the service chiefs, at times with the President, but always with Secretary Johnson in the room. And many times I sat next to the man, and I watched his coolness, the courage of his conviction, his steady hand taking us through the process. And I was very saddened when he finally decided that after his time in the Department of Defense, he went back into private practice. Probably good for him getting back into private practice, but it was our loss in the Department of Defense and for the services. So I was delighted to learn last year that the President had invited Jay Johnson to come back into service and serve as our Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. When I took my job as Commandant, I had 4 principles. The first was to steady our service. The second was to honor our profession. The third was to strengthen our partnerships. And then finally, to look out for our shipmates. Secretary Johnson, I'm sure, did not have that as a script, but he's done exactly that for the Department of Homeland Security. He has steadied this department. He's got us going in the right direction. He is developing our profession as members of the Department of Homeland Security. He has strengthened partnerships across government with the Department of Defense and the interagency, and he is certainly looking out for our shipmates, in our case, the men and women who work for the Department of Homeland Security. He has one of the toughest jobs in government because the citizens of the United States expect the Department of Homeland Security to be right 100% of the time. That's a huge responsibility. It rests in this man, and that's why it's my honor and privilege to introduce the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, our Service Secretary, the Honorable J. Charles Johnson.
Good morning, cadets. I said good morning, cadets. Superintendent, they don't sound very excited about graduating. I said good morning, cadets. Come on. Okay. First thing I'd like you to do is to, if you haven't done this already today or all week long, please turn around and say thank you to the family members sitting behind you for helping to get you to this day. Give them a hand. Mom, Dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, I know you're proud of these cadets, and you're proud that they've traveled the road they've traveled and the choice they've made today. I'm honored to be here, part of this ceremony, this celebration. I do have a piece of business we need to conduct, which I will get to in a moment. Before I do that, I want to begin by offering a tribute to your terrific Commandant, who is retiring from the United States Coast Guard in a week. Admiral, next week you and I will be standing on a different stage back in Washington, and I and others will recognize the nearly 40 years of service that you and Linda, who's sitting back here, have given to the nation as we observe one of the oldest military traditions, the change of command. Admiral Papp, you leave the Coast Guard stronger, more adaptable, and ready to confront the evolving threats we face as a nation. You have had a truly remarkable career, and your service has made a real and lasting difference on our United States Coast Guard. For your service, your leadership, your many contributions, and the example you have set for so many of the Coast Guard's leaders, we thank you. Bob Papp has helped to shape a Coast Guard that you should be excited to be joining today. There are many new things to look forward to in today's United States Coast Guard. I am excited for you. A few weeks ago, I visited the shipyard in Mississippi, where I witnessed the construction of our new national security cutters. I walked through the Alexander Hamilton and was truly impressed by its crisp and clean look and feel. I looked at the new technology on the bridge, asked and was told that the average age of those who will occupy that bridge and operate that equipment was somewhere between 19 and 20. I imagined myself doing a tour of duty on board the Alexander Hamilton and never having to return to Washington. I'd still like to do that tour of duty and never have to go back to Washington. As I stepped off the Hamilton, I thought of this address, and I thought of you, and how all of you are graduating into a new United States Coast Guard. I thought about how many of you will spend your careers sailing on new cutters that Admiral Papp championed. I have inherited Bob Papp's enthusiasm for the recapitalization of the Coast Guard fleet, and I pledge that I will continue to make it a priority for me and the Department of Homeland Security. I also know that now that we have completed military operations in Iraq and we are winding down operations in Afghanistan, attention will turn to the Coast Guard. Though many may disagree with some national security policies, Americans continue to honor and respect men and women in uniform. The Coast Guard of today and tomorrow will in particular, I believe, be an object of honor and respect. You present a blend of national security, homeland security, and day-to-day maritime and port security that all Americans appreciate. I also happen to believe the Coast Guard has the best uniforms. In fact, I will confess something very personal. Last August, while I was back in private life, and before I had any idea that I would be Secretary of Homeland Security, long before I got to visit that shipyard in Mississippi, my family and I were driving down I-95 from our annual vacation on Martha's Vineyard. A week later, we would take my son to college in California. We stopped for dinner at a restaurant just off I-95, right near here. Several cadets were at the next table. I looked at those fine young men and women and admitted to myself, knowing my son's own love for boats and the sea, I wish I had thought of the Coast Guard Academy for him, or at least promoted it as an option. I have reviewed the academic achievements of the class of 2014 and am impressed. I'm also impressed that the class of 2014 displayed tremendous compassion for the community. You served more than 25,000 community and institutional service hours, supporting programs to fight cancer, build homes for those in need of shelter, promoting the adoption of pets, and providing tutors for students. You performed acts of heroism, including a rescue that saved the life of a mariner in distress. You are truly an impressive class of Coast Guard cadets. Now, the business. I graduated college in 1979. This past weekend, I went to my 35th reunion, which brought back a lot of memories. The class of 1979 of Morehouse College, where I attended, we were rebels without a cause. It was after the civil rights era was over, and we protested anything and everything, including food. We were served rations in green trays with 5 compartments each and no seconds. One day, the Sunday, I remember it like it was yesterday, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, our administration at Morehouse College, an all-male college, decided to serve a buffet. Now, lesson learned, you cannot serve a buffet to 2,000 men who have been on rations for an entire semester. Really ugly things happen. Several people went to the hospital that day. The food was gone by the time that 10% of the student body passed through the line. I empathize with those who demonstrate over food. I understand that there's been some of that here at the Academy the last couple of years. So, with the power vested in me as Secretary of Homeland Security, by virtue of the transfer you just saw, I am pleased to announce that those of you, any of you, with demerits received at this Academy are hereby forgiven, and you are cleared to graduate. Now, one other thing, on a very serious note, and I would be remiss if I did not say this to you as your service secretary. You men and women in uniform enjoy the respect and admiration of the American people in large part because your predecessors have earned it for you. You cannot take it for granted in the future, and you too must earn it. I'm talking about ethics, a code and standards to live and serve by, the strong sense of right and wrong that you received at this academy, the values of honor, devotion to duty, respect, and a stout heart. The American public views their military, including this Coast Guard, as a bastion for honesty, honor, integrity, and values. Do not disappoint them. You must uphold those standards. I, the Commandant the future Commandant, the President, the Congress, and the American public expect a lot from you and expect no less. Fail in this, and you fail us all. And perhaps more important to you, you will reflect poorly on your shipmates sitting to your right and to your left. What am I talking about? It's not enough to live by the letter of the rules. As the senior lawyer for the Department of Defense for 4 years, I've seen general and flag officers who followed the letter of the rules, but brought embarrassment to their service. The key are values-based decisions. Set the example for service members in the Coast Guard. Behave as if the whole world is watching. Imagine yourself having to explain and defend every decision you make about your personal conduct to your superior officer, his superior, and his superior. But the true test, whether your internal moral and ethics compass is working, you will say to yourself, it may be true that if I do this thing, no one will know, but I will know and have to live with myself. This is particularly important for you because among you are the future leaders of the United States Coast Guard. Somewhere among you is the future Commandant, the future Vice Commandant, or other future senior leaders of the United States Coast Guard. We are investing in and depending on you to be our leaders of the Coast Guard 30, 35 years from now. In the military, there's no free agency, no lateral hires. You are the draft picks, and you are the team we put to sea for now and in the future for the next 30, 35, 40 years. It wasn't that long ago that the class of 1975 sat here, and a young Ensign Bob Papp began his service to the nation. That is something to think about as you sit here this morning. When Admiral Papp leaves active service duty next week, it will, of course, be the culmination of a terrific career. But it will also be the beginning of a new chapter in his life, and the opportunity to serve in a different way. The same is true for you. Today is a graduation representing the culmination of 4 years of hard work. But it is not an end. It is not your destination. It is your next beginning. Expectations of you are high. You will be called upon to lead, contribute, uphold the highest standards of conduct, to honor the core values of the Coast Guard, and reflect well upon this academy, your instructors, and each other. You have chosen a different path, and you have had a different college experience from your civilian peers. As your classmate said, at times you felt isolated. It's been hard, and we make it hard for a reason. Our nation, our department, and our Coast Guard requires the best and the strongest. Soon you will deploy to your assignments, and you will be dispersed throughout the world to many diverse and challenging situations. Some of you will protect ports and waterways close to home. Others will conduct patrols far from our shores in support of counterterrorism and narcotics missions. Some of you will enforce maritime laws. Others will perform search and rescue operations. But all of you will be front and center in the shared mission of keeping our nation and the American people safe. Not all of you will complete a career in the Coast Guard, though all of you will soon begin one. In exchange for the preparation you have received and the education this academy provides, your country asks for 5 years. After that, some of you may choose to follow a different path. But you too will take this place and the things you have learned here and the friendships you have made here with you along your path. This academy has instilled within you a commitment to service, the qualities of leadership, a strong character, and the values the Coast Guard stands for and espouses. In whatever capacity you use them, and in whatever direction they are focused, I am confident you will make a difference in the lives of those around you. I wish all of you fair winds and smooth sailing. Thank you very much.